Americans' faith in media, and hearing from a woman of faith who works in media. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Most Americans trust Christian media. National Religious Broadcasters and Barna study finds. This is from back in May, and I have reported on this in the past over the last couple months, but it's a very interesting study, a very interesting report. So it's worthwhile to repeat. Building on earlier insights from our 2025 State of Christian Media study with Barna, NRB writes, this next phase explores how Americans perceive Christian media, and based on a nationally representative sample of over 2,000 U.S. adults, the research paints a picture of Christian media that is broadly viewed in a positive light, though not without some critique. Isn't that amazing? As Americans' trust in media falls, continues to fall, continues to dwindle, Americans' trust in Christian media is on the upswing. That certainly is optimistic news. It shows that there are some media outlets out there that are, in fact, deserving of your trust. Before I get into more of this, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network. That is, speaking of faith-based media, right? That is the faith-based media outreach of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church, Pastor Jack Hibbs's church out in California. I'm partial to this church. I'm partial to Pastor Jack Hibbs. He, in fact, was the one who wrote the foreword to my most recent nonfiction book, God-Given or Bust, Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths, which, if you look at the theme of my book and then look at what I just said about Americans' rise in trust in Christian media, it seems like more and more Americans are awakening to the idea that the problems in America, the problems in all the world, in fact, but specific to America, the problems in the United States are due in large part to the turning we have seen of citizens of America turning away from God, turning toward government more and more, demanding government provide solutions that are better left to God to decide. So as I was saying, Bold and Blunt is part of Real Life Network, RLN, part of their lineup. You can go there, check out all the faith-based podcasts and video productions they have available there. Bold and Blunt has been part of that lineup for a couple years. Very humble, very humble to say that, because as I said, I have a lot of respect for the church there out in California, Pastor Jack Hibbs, and what they're doing not just in the church but also in the news. You can also get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com. Scroll to the bottom of the webpage there and find the newsletter section. Click on it and sign up for Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. You will have delivered right to your email box Monday, Wednesday, and Friday like clockwork, right? You can count on it. You can set your clock to it. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you get delivered to your email box, Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. It's my newsletter, contains my commentaries, contains my audio versions of Bold and Blunt, and contains my video versions of Bold and Blunt as well. I just had a video interview I did with Alex Trayman. He is the CEO of JNS.org, that's Jewish News Syndicate, and the Jerusalem bureau chief for JNS out in Israel, where we talked about this peace plan and more things dealing with Israel and the United States and politics and the intertwining of U.S. politics, the White House, with Israeli affairs. So you're going to want to get that delivered right to your email box, so you don't have to go search on it. You can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. Report reveals Christian media has major impact on Americans, young and old. That is a June headline from the Washington Stand. And just reading because it's pretty concise. It's pretty concisely written, the first couple paragraphs. The National Religious Broadcasters, NRB, in collaboration with the Barna Group, released a report with eye-catching statistics, this writer writes. It turns out over 60% of American adults are captivated by Christian media, from TV and radio to podcasts and social media. Half of these surveyed viewers tune into Christian media sources weekly, with 28% labeled as, quote, heavy users, end quote, binge watching across multiple platforms daily. The audience? Here's the really interesting part, right? That's one aspect of interest, that Christian-based media is grabbing the attentions of American citizens. But the audience, the demographics of the audience is the other interesting aspect. Here it is. The Washington Stand writes, it's younger than one might expect. While older generations are still a strong part of the equation, 58%, it's the family-oriented and often conservative Gen Z leading the charge at 64%. Isn't that interesting? We're seeing all these surveys, all these polls, and I report on most of them because this is a huge concern to me. All these surveys and polls and reports showing that the younger generations are turning increasingly toward socialism, increasingly embracing socialism as a viable governing and economic structure for America. And that is worrisome. That is concerning, because if you have the younger generations embracing socialism, you have to think these younger generations are going to grow up and become America's next leaders. So when you combine the mindset of a younger generation learning to embrace socialism with the open border policies of the prior feckless Joe Biden administration and prior very wicked Barack Obama 2 administrations, where the open borders welcomed in so many people from countries that were trained to teach their citizens the government is the provider of all. The government gives, the government can take away. When you have open borders that let in so many people with that mindset, combined with the youthful Americans in this country, all believing that the government's role is to provide, that's a dangerous setup for the future of America. That's when we really have to sit up, take notice, and worry about the future freedoms of America. Because here in America, if I've said it once, I've said it a bazillion times, it's God-given. It's God-given rights and liberties. That is the foundation of American exceptionalism. It's God-given, because the opposite of God-given is government-granted. So you can't have the two coexisting equally. You either have God-given rights and liberties or government-granted rights and liberties. And I know that we don't always live in the black and white. We live mostly in the gray area. So you always have this tension between God-given and government-granted. Just look at national security, right? There are natural tensions that occur there, because some things you need to keep secret for the safety and security of the American citizen. At the same time, some of those things that you keep secret may infringe on what could be considered God-given individual rights and liberties. So you always have this natural tension, this sort of back and forth, this battle. And it hails. It goes back to the founding of the nation, right? Where you had those that wanted strong state rights and those that wanted a stronger central government. But the idea of God-given rights and liberties is the core of American exceptionalism. And it is what makes our nation different and, I say this in all sincerity, superior to any other nation in the world. And if you look at what's taken place in America, the loss of God from the public stage, the growing secularism in America, and the outright hostile attacks on things of God in America, it shows a path of darkness that we were treading for so long. And so when you see polls like this, when you see surveys that show it's not just Americans looking to Christian media for solutions and for news, but it's in particular, especially the younger generations, the ones that are supposedly embracing socialism, that is really cause for optimism. And so I have with me a guest today. She is not only in media, and it's not a media that you would come out and say, oh, that's Christian media, but at the same time, I know for a fact that many who work in it are Christian and are believers and are of the faith. And, to be honest, are pro-Israel, are very strong defenders of Israel, which is another Bible-based greatness for America when we stand strong with Israel. But as I was saying, my guest today is not only a woman who works in media, but she is a woman of faith, and I've come to know her a little bit. Just as a disclosure, I am a contributor with Newsmax. I appear on this woman's show on a pretty much regular basis, once a week, and I've really grown to admire all that she stands for, all that she represents. Her name is Tracy Sabol, and she is the host on Newsmax of National Update. You can tune into it 11 a.m. Eastern Time till noon Eastern Time. She's former EWTN host, and she has a lot to say about what's taking place in America, both in politics and culture, and of course, about faith, her own personal faith, and the importance of faith in general. Tracy Sabol, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. So great to have you here.
Oh, Cheryl, it's so wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You're kind of on the other end now because it's usually you asking me the questions on your Newsmax show. So it's wonderful to have you here to get to know you a little bit and to just talk about some of your thoughts on recent politics. I just wonder, let's just start by talking about the No Kings protests. What were your expectations as you were covering the lead up to No Kings versus how it actually played out?
Well, Cheryl, it's interesting. I want to tell you, I kind of had low expectations for it because I always feel like there's this huge buildup. The left always tries to make things more fantastical than they always are. And there were some interesting things to be seen at these No Kings protests, as there always are. But I didn't think it was, to be honest with you, as huge as they kind of played it up today.
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought there was going to be a lot more violence. So honestly, I was a little bit happy to see that there weren't so many bricks being thrown and properties destroyed. That's new for the left.
Exactly. But there was that one woman who was kind of crazy making, really sad, still making negative references to Charlie Kirk. And that one woman, I don't know if they said, I think I heard she may have been a teacher making that gesture. And I just don't know what goes through people's minds.
Especially teachers, right? I've noticed over the last few years, a lot of these really despicable outbursts have come from the public school system, the public teachers, which is shocking.
It is shocking, and it's really scary too if you think about it, because these are the people who are with our children most hours out of the day during the week. And these are the people who are supposed to be leading our children, caring for our children, and they're the ones who are spewing hate. And that is a very scary thing to see.
Yeah, and I think, and you and I have had a little bit of this discussion before about the ray of sunshine that came from COVID, that it served as a wake-up call to many parents who saw what their public schools were teaching their kids for the first time, it seemed.
Oh, absolutely. I'm out, and you and I've talked about this, I'm out in Loudoun County, Virginia, and we're in the news a lot, but I do love it out here. My children love it out here. I don't love what's been happening in the public schools out here, but COVID, it really was a game changer for a lot of folks. We were stuck at home, right, with the kids, and they were doing online learning, which was a complete, on my eyes, a complete failure on so many levels, and didn't need to be. As you and I talked, we mentioned this before, we had having our private conversations. Schools in Europe were not closed down. But here in the United States, they shut schools down, and I don't know, was it a European COVID virus different than than what we had over here? I don't think so. So what was the big difference? But the difference it made, I think, for us parents is that we heard what was going on. We heard what the teachers were saying to the kids because we were in the other room. And some of the things were outrageous. And here in out Loudoun County, when they kept on shutting down the schools, parents got really vocal about it. And you kind of saw, and I think it opened parents' eyes up, at least mine, to what was happening with the teachers' unions. They weren't out for the kids; they were just in it for themselves.
Yeah, it's despicable, and that's just one side of the problem. The teachers' unions and really how they've infiltrated the public school systems and sort of brought this Marxist type agenda, at least in my view, to public school. But the other side is the culture. The culture is so rotted nowadays. If you're a woman or man of faith, if you're a Christian trying to raise your children to do biblically sound principles in life, it's very difficult to raise your kids in the public school systems in this way, isn't it?
I think it is, especially when you live in metropolitan areas. But before I came to the Washington, D.C. area, I lived in Maine for many years. And I could see what was happening there. I mean, even in middle school, when my children were there during, what used to be, as you and I remember, used to be Pride Week. Now it's become Pride Month. And actually on 14th Street in Washington, D.C., it's Pride Quarter, I guess, because the flags are still up. But I noticed it at my children's middle school in Maine, and they had a big mural up there, and it had two little girls. I'll never forget this because my daughter was in 6th grade at the time before we moved here in the first half of the year. And two little girls holding hands and saying, love is love, and, and all these sayings about that. And I worked in the local news at the time. Of course, I couldn't really say much, but I was offended on multiple levels. My daughter was 11 years old. No, they cannot have a romantic relationship at 11 years old. I didn't allow that. Friends, you can have friends, but no boyfriend, don't have a boyfriend, don't have a girlfriend. And not only were they promoting, in my view, sexuality among very young children. I mean, we're talking about 11 to 13-year-olds, but also same-sex relationships. And they didn't consult the parents about any of that. So, I mean, it seems like it is starting younger and younger. Of course, we've seen that here and outside of Washington, D.C., what was going on in Montgomery County with those books, and parents of Christian parents, Muslim parents, Jewish parents, across all spectrums of religion stood up and said, we're not going to have this in our school. You teaching our little ones about these things that we don't approve of. But I think, at least I'm hopeful, Cheryl, to say that I think maybe we're on, at least under the Trump administration, on a course correction a little bit, and parents feel more confident. They stand up. They're not going to get, they're not going to get pushback or possibly, really serious ramifications like they did under the Biden administration. I mean, parents were targeted. They were targeted.
Yeah, they were being investigated by the Justice Department, right? It really was.
I mean, I'm saying.
Yeah, I think parents now, as you said, they feel a little bit more support from this White House administration and the Department of Education, which is a good thing. But we're talking about a little bit of the challenge to raise children in a godly manner in a society that's just so morally degraded. And I'm just curious, your faith, I know you're a woman of faith, but how did you arrive at that? Were you raised in a household with parents of faith? Did you come to it later in life, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, so I was raised, I'm Catholic. I've been Catholic all my life, a very devout family. So that is my faith. But I didn't always go. I only did a year Catholic school. I went to public school most of my life, but we always went to Mass together on Sundays, sometimes a vigil mass on Saturdays. So that was always part of who I was. And so I tried to, emulate that for my children. It is hard, I will say. in a very secular society, to raise your, especially now, to raise your children with strong faith and morals. But we do the best that we can with what we have to deal with in society. And I think talking to your children and having an open dialogue with them, which is something I try to do, and answer questions, because they're both at the ages now, they're 17 and 20. So they're sort of making their own way in life. But it's interesting that I see them, at least my son who's in college, he's a sophomore. I'm very proud of him because he's doing things on his own. I kind of encourage him, but he's going to mass, he's doing a Bible study. And I'm very hopeful in this generation because I feel like, and I maybe it is the Charlie Kirk effect, that younger people are becoming closer and in their faith, deeper in their faith. And a lot of my daughter, her friends, they'll go to mass together, or if they're not Catholic, she'll go to their services together, and they pray a lot together. So maybe it's just my circle, but I'm glad to see it happening. But I do feel like there has been sort of a revival, because I feel like the left has pushed so much of their propaganda for so long on younger people. They're starting to see I'll be honest with you, I think they're starting to see it's crazy.
Lunatic.
And they're like, this is when you, right? I mean, when you have children say to you, that's just nuts. Like, that makes no sense to me. And my kids will say that to me. And I talk to them a lot because, Cheryl, right? This is what we do for a living. We talk. But teenagers don't always want to talk to you. I kind of force them at the dinner table when I can get them all together. But I'll ask them things, because we're following the news. We report on it. That's our jobs. I'll ask them about the issues with transgenders in the school, or the kids dressing up as the furries and this and that. And, at least my daughter, the conversations I've had with her, she said, Mom, no, actually, there's like one kid in the school who thinks they're a furry, and, they kind of get made fun of. They think it's crazy. They're like, this is like, you're not a cat, okay? You're just not a cat. And then not too many, like, they'll I shouldn't say this probably on your podcast, but they think it's kind of ridiculous. Let's put it that way. They really do.
Because they're sane, and they're just calling out the insanity. Yeah. And, Tracy, I found that very heartwarming, what you were saying about your son in college going to mass. And my 22-year-old son, who is my younger son, he's moved out, been moved out for a while, but he will come over on Sundays and go to church with me. And, it's stuff like that, and I'm sure you feel the same way too. It's stuff like that that really makes you feel like a success as a parent, more than having a child who's a millionaire or a doctor or a lawyer, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's because, there were times I'm going to admit it wasn't always easy to get them to go on Sunday, right? To get them to go. I don't know if you had those challenges.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I have to get up, I have to go. And, we Catholics, we have a lot of masses it's not just one service that you have to make. There's a lot of options, Cheryl. You can go at 8:30. You can go at 10:30, 12:30, 5:30. There's Saturday. I mean, I can't have this. I have that. And you tell them. And, at some point, at least I did have to sit back and say, okay, well, you got your confirmation now. You have to make your choice. In essence, you are an adult in the church now. Now it's up to you. And there was times they didn't want to go. And now I see them coming back. And my daughter will tell me, I went away for a weekend to go see my father in Pennsylvania. And I called my daughter and she wasn't answering it. What is going on? And she's, Mom, I went to mass. I was so happy. Wow. She went by herself, which would have been a challenge 2 years ago, So I think they're getting it. And I think there's just, I really feel like there has been a change. There's been a change since President Trump got elected. A real, just a change in this country. I just feel like I feel like we were under a dark cloud, Cheryl, for many years, right?
Yes.
COVID, Biden, all of that. People almost afraid to speak up. And I feel like out of their shells now, and really thanking God for the wonderful things that we're actually seeing happen in the country right now.
I would characterize it as the demonic forces being chased away a little bit under Donald
Yeah.
Trump, and it started because people were so outraged at what was taking place under Joe Biden, and even before that under Barack Obama. And I think people started praying more, as you pointed
Yeah.
out. And I just wonder if we could finish up with a little bit about the challenges you've faced in media, because you mentioned you were in local news. So I know you haven't always been in news then that was so open about Christian faith and faith in general. Some of the challenges you faced as being a Christian in news, and some of the things that faith has helped you through as you've launched and journeyed through your career.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cheryl. Well, I actually, for most of my career, and I have been in working in news since 1996 in some form or fashion. I've mainly worked in local news up until I actually came to Washington, D.C. Before I worked for Newsmax. I was working at EWTN, which is a global Catholic network. Um, and before that, it was very hard because you're supposed to be unbiased. And we all know, though, that, and I knew it too, that it's been slanted to the left for a long time. Never as far this left, I think, in legacy media as it has been, at least for the past 10 years. But you're not supposed to talk about your faith. Don't wear any. I mean, it was very freeing to me to wear my crucifix or some of my medals, because you really don't wear those. Or people aren't supposed to know, because if they know that you're, say, I'm Catholic, well, then you're pro-life. And then how are you going to be unbiased when it comes to issues, when it comes to abortion, right?
Wow.
So that's hard when I am pro-life and I had to go to places like Planned Parenthood and do interviews. But you have to do that because that's your job, and I got to a point where things like that, and then realizing, well, I've been doing this for a very long time. At that time, it was probably, about 20 years, and thinking, what am I contributing to society? Because I went into it, I wanted to tell people stories. I enjoyed it. You're able to do some good. And then I felt like, wow, just about everything that I'm doing now is negative. Everything is negative. It's either a murder, or it's this or that. And I would come home and I would feel like, you mentioned demonic forces. I feel like a dark cloud over me, and I remember one morning, when I was saying my morning prayers, I got down on my knees and I just said, Christ, please put me where I can be of best service to you, because I don't think this is it anymore. And I was the main anchor at my station. The company was wonderful to me. There wasn't anything that, it wasn't, I was in a bad situation. It was just, I realized, I think I had served my purpose here, and I wasn't serving my fellow man by what I was doing. And once I said that prayer, I asked Christ to put me where I could be of best service to him. 2 weeks later, in my inbox, in my email, there was a job opening for EWTN. And I grew up watching EWTN, and it was for anchor of their evening program, News Nightly. And I thought, this is a sign from God, because I thought that he wanted me to maybe do something completely different, get out of news together. Because I'll be honest with you, Cheryl, I didn't even think about conservative news. I don't even know why. I just didn't think that was an option for me. It didn't enter my head. I thought, oh, maybe I'll work in a nonprofit or do something like that. And so I got that email. I said, I think that's a sign from God. I'm going to apply. But they'll probably, in my head, the doubts, they'll probably not hire me because I work in local news, right? And I'm doing these stories on things that are probably really not in line with the church, because that's my job, secular news, right? So I sent an email with my resume. Immediately they called me, and everything went. It was like it was so quick. Within 2 weeks, even less than that, I was down in DC. I had an interview, and I put it all in God's hands. And I have to tell you, it really was divine intervention, because I ended up getting the job. It went too smoothly. And I said to God, okay, if this is what I need to make this happen. There are all these things, as you know, as a mom, like, okay, well, that interview was in October of 2019, and I needed my kids to finish up after their Christmas break, because I didn't want to pull them out of school and start in the middle, of that term. And I thought, they're not going to go for that. They said, okay. And I said, oh, okay. And then it was all these things that I thought would be maybe, a roadblock, but they said, okay. So it really was at that point when I got the job offer, and it was everything I had prayed for, and God delivered it to me. I said, I can't say no. So, okay, this is for you. I'm doing this this is where you want me to be. And I took that step, and I was so happy that I could, because I could be really fully be myself, and I learned so much, Cheryl, because working in local news and secular news for so long, there were stories that we never covered. I mean, take, for instance, Christian persecution in Africa. We never touched that. I never knew anything about that. And I thought, geez, what a bubble I have been living in. And I saw, it's really interesting the way you see things. You have different eyes, because you're so kind of blinded and shielded during that time. And so it's been really wonderful. I was there for 5 years, and excited and so happy and grateful to God that I'm at Newsmax now, and I can fully be, myself. I'm with like-minded people, and you can really speak the truth, because you really are muzzled in many ways. People don't know that, even if you don't agree with something, to be honest with you, let's say, throw out, okay, COVID, you and I have talked about
Yes.
this. I would have been forced to get the vaccine. I did not get the vaccine. I couldn't get the vaccine for health reasons, because it would have potentially truly killed me, because I had Guillain-Barré syndrome when I was in my 30s. But I would have been forced. And, luckily I was in an organization, working for a conservative organization, that I did not have to do that. So it's really been a blessing to come over finally to the side where I was meant to be.
Come over to the light. It's so fun. It's so funny. Two quick similarities. I worked in secular news for a very long time as well, and you're right. It's a completely different experience. And second off, this job I have right now was a godsend too. Very similar in how the door just opened and dropped in my lap. I couldn't believe it. Best job I've ever had in my life. So, yeah, God works in mysterious ways if you just step back and let him. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Tracy Sabol. I will be seeing you soon in studio. Can't wait. But in the meantime, thank you so much for sharing your story of faith and your thoughts on politics. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl. It's been so wonderful. God bless.
God bless. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. And don't forget to tune into Newsmax. Tracy Sabol show is 11 a.m. Eastern Time. She is a great host, and she has the best guests, so you're not going to want to miss that news show. Again, 11 a.m. Eastern Time until noon. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.